Hey guys, it's your girl Carly. Welcome to another episode of Koko'S World, and I'm so excited to have our next guest, Sydney, here. Before we get started, I would love to just introduce you. So, Sydney, you're from Fort Mill, South Carolina, who graduated from Clemson University, whose focus was in business analytics, which is how we met. She is the middle child of five, and she's here today to discuss as an early adult in her career and life's experiences that has shaped her to be who she is. So, hey, Sydney.
Hi, Carly.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. And I just want to say thank you so much for being a part of season 1 of Koko'S World. And also, before we delve deep into your life and all the questions, if there's anything that is a little too much, take your time and we can either skip over it or feel free to just tell me that you're not comfortable with sharing, okay?
Okay. Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. So as we shared that you are from Fort Mill, South Carolina, grew up, was raised, how was that? How was your childhood?
It was interesting. I am the middle child of five. Originally, there's four of us.
Okay.
My parents got divorced from a very early age. I think I was 4. And then when I turned 10, I was living in Rock Hill with my dad. And when I turned 10, he moved us into a house in Fort Mill, which is why I say I'm from Fort Mill, because I spent a majority of my childhood there. And he moved me into a house with his girlfriend, I would say, dare I say, baby mama.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I lived there with her, my little sister, who's my half sister, me, and my little brother.
So growing up with 5 total kids, you being the one of 5, how do you feel that affected you growing up?
So I think my family had a really interesting dynamic.
Okay.
It was more so who could be the meanest so that they can be the favorite. My older sister is currently 32. My youngest sister is 17.
Wow.
So there's a big difference. My little brother and I are the closest in age. We're only 18 months apart. And I think with all my siblings, we had such different childhoods based off where we were living and who we were interacting with. For example, my older sister and I, we were never really close. When it was just the 4 of us living in a house together, I wanted to be just like her. I thought she was great. She was perfect. My dad just adored her and always said how amazing and perfect she was. And he didn't really say the same for me because we were just so different. And I think with that, it really affected how my childhood was as well as my other siblings.
Do you feel that it caused any resentment or changes with your sister and yours relationship?
Absolutely. I would say more so when we were younger and impressionable.
Okay.
My older sister, when I moved into the house in Fort Mill, she stayed behind in Rock Hill because she was a senior in high school and was about to graduate. And I would say there was already kind of resentment there. There was never really a connection. She was closer with my older brother, who is the second child. And they bonded because of living in the same house together.
Right.
Where it was just more of a disconnect for me and her. My older brother, if I can go into this.
Yeah, of course.
My older brother, he never really liked me. He has Asperger's. He always hated me since I was a kid, and that kind of just stuck with it. And then my little brother and I, although we're the closest in age, we used to fight all the time. And there were days where it was better. I think as we got older, it got a lot better, especially since we both went to Clemson. And then it was really my little sister, I would say, that was kind of the glue between myself and my older sister.
Okay.
My older sister and her they're kind of the same, very type A, and I'm just the outlier. But I was always with my little sister. I was I don't want to say her caregiver, because I think that might be wrong, and I was not in any way her mother, but I was just taking care of her, but not an entire caregiver role.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes perfect sense. So growing up, did you all grow up religious, or how was that? What was that dynamic?
So I grew up a conservative Jew, which it was always kind of made a big deal in my life because I grew up in a very southern town. Some would even consider the Bible Belt.
More than Greenville?
Yes.
Okay.
Rock Hill in York County. It was always kind of made known to my parents, especially my dad, how different we were from our religious views. And our temple, for example, was in Charlotte, which, even though we were close to the border, is another state away.
Yeah.
And when I was growing up, we were taught the importance of Judaism and how we should be proud to be Jewish, but I wouldn't say that we necessarily practiced all the laws of Judaism.
Okay. Do you feel religion brings trauma to individuals, or do you feel that it brought you or your family issues?
I would say yes and no.
Okay.
I was always taught that religion is a way for you to have a community that shares similar beliefs as you, as a way to come together as one. I would say in Judaism particularly, I personally have not experienced a lot of trauma through it. The only trauma I guess I would have is that it is a different language. It's in Hebrew, and I was never really good at Hebrew.
Okay.
And my father speaks Hebrew beautifully. And so he'd always, you know how there's the saying, like, you're holding the flashlight for your dad and he yells at you?
Yes.
That was me when he was trying to teach me Hebrew, because I was so bad at it and I did not care about it. But I would say personally, I didn't really have a lot of trauma through it.
Do you feel that people use religion as an excuse to be good or bad people?
I would say yes.
Okay.
I would say from what I've experienced, at least, because I will say I don't know a lot about Christianity.
Okay.
I never really have. My friends who were Christian, who go to church regularly, they never really, for lack of a better term, shoved it down my throat.
Mm-hmm.
So I only know surface level of Christianity.
Right.
And I would say from what I've seen of my friends and from what I've seen working in the service industry, that I do think a lot of Christianity are people on the surface being nice, and then still being judgmental behind closed doors.
Yes.
And not outwardly showing it.
Yes.
With Judaism, I don't think I've experienced that as much. I think just, everyone I've dealt with in the Jewish temple is just kind of who they are. There is judgment, but I would say it's not as outwardly shown as it can be with Christianity.
Right.
And I'm blanking.
Oh, that's good.
Okay.
So what is Judaism, if you don't mind me asking? And did you all always practice that, and do you practice that now to this day? Or have you are you more just a spiritual person and have disassociated with it?
Yeah. So Judaism is, when I explain it to people, we go by the Old Testament, not the New Testament.
Okay.
From my own understanding, the New Testament introduces Jesus as the Messiah. Is that correct?
Yes.
Where the Old Testament just focuses on those stories. And we recognize Jesus as a real person, but we don't believe he is the Son of God, since we only go by the Old Testament.
Makes sense.
I would say growing up, I felt more connected to Judaism.
Okay.
I grew up conservative. I got bat mitzvahed. Again, being sometimes the only Jewish kid in my school, I felt like that was my one special thing, so to speak.
Yeah.
As I got older, my dad he's always been I don't want to say fairly religious, but he has been spiritual and is proud to be Jewish. When I was in high school, he switched us from our conservative temple that I grew up in since I was a kid to an Orthodox temple.
Okay.
And I think that showed me a whole different side of Judaism. I would say now, as an adult in my life, I am definitely spiritual, but I don't necessarily would say that I'm a practicing Jew. There are times when I say prayers in the morning that I'll say a Hebrew prayer.
Right.
But above all else, I just pray. I believe in God still. I just don't necessarily think I have to be defined by the Jewish religion.
That's fair. And that makes sense. So now, where are you? You talked about your transition with the Orthodox versus the, I don't even know.
Conservative?
Yeah, conservative.
Mm-hmm.
And then, being the one child out of 5, where are you with your family now? How has that transition been with a family that is so, deep into a religion versus someone that is more practicing on a spiritual level? How has that dynamic shifted, or has that affected you all in any way?
So I would say, in terms of Judaism, when we went to a conservative temple, because my little sister was so young, she got to sit on the side with my dad. I should explain, Orthodox Judaism, they follow all the Jewish rules. Okay. They're very strict with it. And one of the main things is that in their synagogues, women and men are separate by a wall.
Wow. Okay.
And women, for example, I just mentioned I was bat mitzvahed, which is when you read the Torah before your synagogue and you're seen as a woman in Judaism. In conservative Judaism, women are not allowed to read from the Torah.
Wow.
Yeah. So when we went there, my little sister, I didn't have to sit with me because she was so young. She was allowed to sit with my dad on the other side, who, when he went to temple, he was all in. He was very spiritual with it. And I just kind of felt lonely on the other side. I didn't feel like I was connecting as much. I was never really great at Hebrew.
Okay.
And I always found it hard to focus in temple. And I would say, I don't want to say that drove a divide or that was the deciding factor, but I do think it kind of made me, I think it made me become more spiritual and not identify as much with Judaism.
Okay. And now, years later, has that divide stayed there, or have you learned to kind of manage in a way with your family where you guys seem to have some inclusion, even though like it's not the same?
So with my family, I went through a lot of really tumultuous events in my life with my family.
Okay.
As I mentioned, I was living with my dad's girlfriend. And there were a lot of moments throughout my life where I realized that I wasn't really receiving the love that my little sister was receiving or my little brother was receiving. And as I started growing up, it started getting worse and worse. And I was just trying to navigate my teenage years, trying to be a good person, and yet feeling like a punching bag in that house and how hostile it was. I quickly realized that my dad wasn't going to be living in that house with us. He sent us there and he kind of realized, oh, I don't have to take care of my kids anymore.
Right.
I can just send money and they'll be fine. And then my birth mom, I always had a very iffy relationship with. I never felt really close to her. She didn't really feel like a maternal figure.
Okay.
And I realized later into my teenage years that she had no desire to be a maternal figure. And I ended my relationship with her when I was 18 due to some events. And then when I was 22, I was finishing my last semester at Clemson, and I made the really tough decision to tell my family I wasn't coming home, that I was going to be an adult and be on my own. And I cut them out of my life. They cut me out of their life. And it's been that way since.
And how has that journey been for you?
It's been interesting. When I ended it, I knew going into my last semester that I had to cut off my family. When I turned 18, the abuse got so much worse. I will say it was very emotional abuse. It was never really physical. There were things thrown and whatnot. I never really got hit or anything, but it was very toxic emotional abuse in that household. When I went into my last semester in Clemson in August of 2019, I have a really great friend of mine who's like my brother. His name's Paul. And he sat down with me and I was just telling him about my summer and all the shit that I had gone through and the things that were said to me, and finding out that even though I'm 22 years old, I'm not allowed to have access to my own bank account that I had had since I was 15, and just, cursed out, told that there was no fucking way I was going to be able to look at it, even though it's my own money that I worked hard for. Quickly going back to that, during that summer, I was working 50-hour weeks. My stepmom had given away my room. So my room, as a 22-year-old who was working so much just to not be in that house, was our front room that didn't have a door. I lived on a futon. And the dog, my stepmom and my little sister had started taking care of dogs, foster dogs.
Okay.
And so there was a dog that lived in the room with me who was pregnant, who cried all night. And at the time I was working for Starbucks, so I'd have to be up by 4, and I'd work from 4:30 until 1:30, go home, shower, relax, and then because I just didn't want to be home, I would go close at 5 until 10 or 11 some nights.
Wow.
So it was the summer of 2019 was a very hard summer for me. It made me realize a lot of things about my family, a lot of sad things that I realized I could not associate myself with anymore. And so going back, when I went to school in August of 2019, I was with Paul, and he said, you can't go back to that house. It's going to be hard. There's going to be times, there are going to be sacrifices you have to make, but you need to be an adult, and you can't be an adult under that roof.
Well, I'm really proud of you for choosing your inner peace and yourself, because I know that family is very hard to navigate, and learning to trust more so people that are not nowhere related to you versus people you've known your whole life. Sometimes you miss hidden gems because of the fear of the unknown, of meeting new people. But I'm really happy that you found your village and your family. So what do you do on a daily basis to help protect your peace, during holidays or just on a daily basis?
Yeah, I would say it was really hard when I first was on my own. There were many days where I kind of regretted my decision. I thought, I started my adult life with $60 to my name. I didn't have a car. I had a Walmart trap phone because I was too nervous to turn on my real phone, even though I kept it. And thankfully, at the time, I had a boyfriend who was very supportive and very helpful. I will say without him, I don't think I would have made it. But then I just kind of started to figure out who I was. I would say I haven't really started doing that until about a year and a half ago. That boyfriend I mentioned, we had broken up and I had to move out of our house into my own apartment. And it was the first time I realized, oh, I'm really on my own. It's just me and my dog at night. And I realized I wanted to know who I was. Yeah. So I started putting myself out there more. I started going to therapy and really diving into all of my childhood trauma and, some PTSD that I may have had from that. And I would say within the past year and a half, I've done a lot more things for myself. I'm in a really good spot. I figured out who I am, I would say, for the most part. And yeah, I'm just going from there.
Can you believe that you were able to do it?
No. I never thought I would be able to. I was always really nervous. Because even though I went through so much childhood trauma, I still had a belief that, oh, that's my family. Yeah. Those are the only people in my life that I'm blood connected to. And it took a long time for me to realize that families are supposed to love you, and they're supposed to remind you that you're loved. They're not supposed to threaten you or tell you really mean things about yourself or make fun of you behind your back or not celebrate your birthday. That's a whole thing. Or, some other really, really evil things that were said to me. And I will say, kind of going off on that, my stepmom was a large source of my childhood trauma. Yeah. And it's hard because now that I go to therapy and I talk it out, that even with all the evil things that she did to me, I still want to look at her with grace because I do realize she was put in a situation that she did not ask to be in. She was kind of forced to be in. And it's really hard on me still when I think about it, when I think about my money that she took, because even though I worked hard for that, I also think she didn't ask for this.
Right.
But then I found out some other things when I became an adult and on my own that I was like, actually, maybe it's fine. Maybe you get what you deserve.
Well, that's fair. And so what advice would you give to a person who may be dealing with the strength to walk away from a toxic relationship or just family or a person that is going through similar what you experienced?
Yeah. It's not easy. When I tell my story to people, I think they just kind of assume that one day I was like, peace, I'm out, goodbye, I never want to speak to you again. It was not an easy decision, but I knew it was a decision that I had to make in order to continue my life. Yeah. I would say, that fall semester of 2019, I was told that I was not allowed to get a job, that I would have to stay at home and work at Starbucks still and live on that futon, that, I still wouldn't have access to my own bank account.
Right.
And just all I thought about was how much pain I had been put through, especially since I turned 18. That was when my parents got stricter. And I've done a lot of reflection, especially in therapy, on maybe if I was the problem.
Right.
Maybe I had been, I don't want to say evil, but maybe I deserved that. And I realized, and it's really hard for me as an adult, I realized that I didn't deserve it. I didn't deserve the way I was treated. I didn't deserve to have mean things said to me by my own family who's supposed to love me and protect me.
Yes.
And I would say to those people who are going through that, you can do it. There comes a point where you have to stand up for yourself. Mm-hmm. And as Paul said, you might be lonely. You might sleep in an apartment that has cockroaches everywhere, and you might sleep on a mattress on the floor, but you can do it. You can get through it.
And before we close, what would you tell younger Sydney?
Oh, that's hard. I would say you need to start learning to love yourself. It's something I still work on today. It's something I deal with in therapy. Just trying to figure out how to love me for who I am, realizing that past mistakes were mistakes and you can grow from them, but mainly just that you did not deserve the pain that you were put through and that life does get better.
Well, also, before we close out, I know I said that a while ago, but is there anything that you would like to finish off? I mean, one, your story is remarkable, and the piece of advice of, you will get through this and you're stronger than who you believe that you are. That is so true, because since day one that I've met you, I felt like you were just a pillar of strength, and I've watched you overcome and evolve since day one to like today. Just the things of like how you talk to yourself, and the little things that make you feel great, and getting out there, putting yourself out there, because I know putting yourself out there when you've been in a world of rejection for so long is also fearful, because you instantly go into mode of like, if I meet this person, will they reject me? But I'm so proud of like the kickball.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank
I was
you.
calling you kickboxing, but it's kickball. I'm just so proud of the kickball and like the things that you've done to be extra active, but also to build your community, because with that comes strength.
Yes.
And I hope that you're proud of yourself for that as well.
I am. I really started to feel proud of myself within the past couple months. I would say with that, I don't lose your kindness.
Yes.
I've always been a very kind person. I don't like making other people feel bad. Not to say I won't defend myself now. I will defend myself in a kind way. But I remember the first therapist I went to after I was going through a bunch of turmoil. It was about 2 years ago. She said, it's remarkable that you're not an alcoholic and you're not on drugs and you're not in a toxic relationship. And I realized, one, that I probably had a good excuse to be, but also just how you can be a kind person, you can live your life, and you can get over those bad things and start anew.
Yes. So I just would love to share once that I have so much gratitude in my heart for you, one, being a part of season 1, but also being vulnerable to share, so much about yourself to the world, because obviously this will be on a public platform, but, and also just being part of season 1 of Koko'S World. And I appreciate all the listeners out there. And until next time, I hope you remember that someone loves you.